Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience, and welcome to today's HCC virtual town hall discussion on racism for faculty, staff, and students. I am Janet May, Chief Human Resources Officer, Talent Engagement for Houston Community College. Today's session is being recorded and will be available later this week to faculty, staff, and students for viewing. We ask you to submit all questions and/or comments using our question and answer feature, which will be available a little later in the session. And we'll also answer questions from the audience toward the end of the session. Today's discussion is one of many which are taking place throughout the college and not the last. I want to thank the Faculty Senate for leading conversations last week regarding the topic of racism with faculty, student life, and student leadership for their upcoming events in honor of Juneteenth. Dr. Shante Graves and Chief Cunningham for joining us on a previous HCC virtual coffee break to have conversations regarding events over the past weeks and months. David Cross and the Office of Institutional Equity team for all their work, and Darren Boston, HCC Faculty Senate member, faculty member in Student Success, a previous Faculty Senate chair, and our current Inclusion Fellow. His work with faculty, staff, and students on the topics of inclusion, bias, and racism have been very important. I want to personally thank Mr. Ramel Young, Vice Chancellor for Public Information, Communications, and External Relations, and Dr. Shante Graves, Vice Chancellor, Student Services, for their help in making today's town hall possible. I would be remiss if I did not thank Chancellor Maldonado for having candid conversations with us and giving us his full support. Today's discussions will be moderated by Dr. Helen Graham, Chair of Philosophy, Humanities, and Library Sciences. She's also Chair of the Faculty Senate Diversity and Inclusion Committee and a member of HCC's Women in Leadership program. I want to thank Helen for agreeing to be a moderator for this important discussion. I also want to take a moment to thank Kyle Cooper, Executive Director, Cybersecurity and Networks, for assisting us with any technical concerns and monitoring the chats. Our panelists today are leaders from Student Services, faculty, students, police department, and talent engagement. Thank you to each of you for being part of this important discussion. Some discussions may be personal comments and not necessarily the views of HCC. It is only through our personal experiences and conversations can we look at our past and our present to make a better future. With that, Chancellor Maldonado, I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you and good morning, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I sent out a system-wide email a couple of weeks ago to make clear the institution's position and my personal feelings on the injustice that we're all working to remedy. And I want to read some specific points from my email to make sure that the message is clear. So I'm pleased to welcome today the entire HCC family, including students, faculty, and staff, to our first of what will be many open and honest conversations. Equality and tolerance are the foundations of our collective success, and these precepts guide our work at HCC each and every day. We recognize our obligation as an institution and as individuals to battle inequality, intolerance, and racism. Here at HCC, we promote opportunity through access, equity, and education. I am committed to ensuring that anyone who steps on an HCC campus feels welcome, that all members of our faculty and staff feel supported and heard, and all of our students feel safe and supported by the college whose mission is to help raise them up. I am proud to say that our student body is the most diverse in the country, and we offer degrees to more minority populations than any other college in America. We take seriously our responsibility to lead our community in furthering equality and respect for all who call Houston home. This is a safe environment for you to share your honest feelings and suggestions, which at times might seem uncomfortable. In the days and months ahead, let's continue the important dialogue and work together to take action and move forward. Today we'll be having a discussion, but the basis of success is turning our thoughts and discussions into action. Thank you for being here today and participating, And I look forward to more of these discussions to come. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Helen Graham. I will be the moderator for this town hall session, and I'd like to welcome you all. Since the death of George Floyd, weeks of protests have been happening around the world, not just within the United States. Additionally, within the past 2 weeks, other families are now dealing with the death of their loved ones. Rayshard Brooks, father of 4, killed in Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta. On May 31st, 38-year-old Malcolm Harsh was found hanging from a tree near a public library in Victorville, California. On June 12th, 24-year-old Robert Fuller was found hanging from a tree near City Hall in Palmdale, California. And yesterday in Northwest Houston, an unidentified Latino man was found hanging from a tree. All 3 of these deaths have been ruled as suicides, the hangings. Mr. Floyd's death brings to the forefront issues that we failed to deal with directly, which brings us here today. We want to have a candid discussion about racism, but first I'd like to introduce our panel. So joining us this morning are Desmond Lewis, Faculty Senate President. We have Dr. Chastity Holloman Douglas, Associate Vice Chancellor of Special Programs and Success. Dr. Rima Adil, Dean of Student Services, Northwest College. Teddy Tovar, Program Director, Respiratory Therapy. Greg Cunningham, Chief of Police. Hannah Awa, Secretary, United Student Council. Gregory Norwood, President, Student Government Association. Janet May, Chief Human Resources Officer. And Dr. Cesar Maldonado, our Chancellor. Welcome to all of our panelists. And I'd like to remind you again that this town hall is being recorded. So let's get started. So this question is for everyone on the panel. Take about a minute to answer this question. The recent untimely killing of George Floyd has elevated the issue of racial discrimination in the United States and across the globe. What can the college do to encourage meaningful discourse about topics related to race and equality among students, faculty, and staff? Janet, can we start with you?
Absolutely, thank you. This has been a topic that it's been a hard couple of weeks, I think, for everyone as we go through. And I think what we can do is that we can continue to have these conversations. We need to have meaningful conversations. We need to be able to understand one another and really listen. I think sometimes we hear, but we don't listen to what's going on. And I think we have to do that, and we have to continue to promote equality. As Chancellor Maldonado said, we are the most diverse community college in the nation. We ask our communities to come to us. We ask our students to be here and learn with us. And we have to listen to them and what their needs are, and we have to take action to continue to address the issues of racism.
Dr. Maldonado, would you like to respond?
Basis. Certainly listening and learning is a basis to start. But what we should be include in our discussion is beyond the present challenges we have, to ensure that in the future we continue this dialogue. And the way that we will do it at HCC is to continue to engage all of our employees and our communities, as well as our students, in a dialogue well into the future. This is really a genesis of a dialogue that should have been going on for a long, long time, and to help catapult our conversation into the future, to make sure that we continue to talk to each other and to listen. HCC is going to be forming an institute. We don't have a name for it yet, but it will be one that deals with injustice, championing justice and equity, and fighting racism. We'll be working with Dr. Steinwender at the uh, Center for Healing of Racism and creating curriculum for students to take and holding continuing education seminars for employers and for others in the community and for ourselves as well. So we continue to have in our dialogue the opportunity to fight racism, to battle the injustice, and bring equity to everyone in our communities. And I'm shocked with the continuation, even after Mr. Floyd's horrible death. We continue to see the needless death of people of color, of African Americans, primarily across the country. And this is something that we need to get deeply involved in to fix. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Holloman Douglas.
Hi. So thank you, Dr. Graham. And I just have to echo Chancellor Maldonado. I'm really happy to hear about the work that we're planning for the institute that we're creating, because that's the first thing I thought about. So often when these issues come to the forefront, and issues as in Black people being murdered, we have one conversation, we have one town hall, we bring people together to have, to have a conversation. And then that's it. We don't see a continuation of the conversation and action actually coming into place. And so my suggestion would be for our institution to really embed these conversations into how we do everything. It should be the norm for us to come together and have these conversations. So through all types of options, there are many options out there for us. For instance, in addition to an institute, having a diversity and equity center who are trained to lead these conversations on a regular basis, certificate programs for our students. There should be no student who graduates from HCC or any other higher education institution without having a conversation, having several conversations about race, because we are raising and educating the nation's next leaders. And so if we expect for these issues of racism to be eradicated, we have to be able to be intentional about how we are educating the leaders of tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. President Lewis.
Thank you. I believe that it starts with the basic premise of respect. And if that respect is actually practiced, the discourse will follow and the actions will therefore follow. So when you see something that's wrong, you say something and you take those actions. But many times individuals feel as though they are alone and isolated. And when that happens, then people suffer in silence. So at this point, I would say no more. It's a call to action. These unfortunate events that have recently erupted across the nation have placed a microscope on many things that certain communities have felt from the beginning. And I can honestly say, the conversations that I've had with the chancellor, we are taking those meaningful steps for action, such as, and Helen, you and I are working on the diversity and inclusion certification, thinking about how do we make everyone at the college feel valued the entire time and not let others feel subjugated based upon the larger conversation that's taking place across the nation. These issues of racial divides and racism are pervasive. And again, it's time to say no more, and it's time to stop with conciliatory type statements that are sometimes meant to assuage conversations. I will say this, to encourage further action, we have to acknowledge that this is more than a moment. And for many of us, this is the existence in which we have been given. And with that being said, you must be unapologetic in your approach and the way that you're able to articulate this for everyone that's out. Today, for example, is the funeral and the services for Dr. Thomas Friedman from Texas Southern University, a pillar in our community, whom of which acted as an exemplar and whom of which was the impetus for many individuals that attended Texas Southern University to have this type of voice. So I would say to you, don't allow your voice to be muted. And let's talk. Also with Janet May, when she asked to be to do this town hall for me to participate in it, I was very happy to hear that and see how we're moving in the right direction. But the continuance of this and the actions that happen afterwards that are sustainable are going to be the most important. So as faculty, that's what we can do.
Thank you. Dr. Adil?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Ram, and everyone for including me in this discussion. And I know it's challenging times for everyone. It is not easy, but I am so proud to say when that statement came out from our institution, that was our first step. When we started hosting these dialogues, starting with the last session with Dr. Shanti Grace and Chief Cunningham, I was so happy to see that we are having these dialogues. We have a huge institution of faculty, staff, and students, and some of us are very busy in routines and everyday deliverables. So these kind of dialogues, these kind of sessions, I think it will bring a lot of value to everyone. And I think we can see here when 300 people join to discuss and talk about and listen to these kind of dialogues. So I appreciate if we continue to have these dialogues and increase our visibility on our social media and increase our visibility on our website where we can show what is our standing as an institution where no racism will be allowed. And now we are getting ready to go back on campuses. So I think signage, just put the signage everywhere. When things are important to you, you make it known, you make it visible so people can read it wherever they go. They can see it, they can practice it. So I am glad to be here to be part of this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Tovar?
Good morning, Dr. Ray. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. I appreciate the opportunity. Piggybacking on what Dr. Maldonado has stated, being one of the largest community colleges with a very diverse student body and faculty, I think that as leaders in education and leaders of department heads, we should be at the forefront helping to lead these conversations. I think it's important that we engage our key internal and external stakeholders because we are a community college, and I feel that we have to serve our community in that manner, that to engage and improve these conversations. And it's not going to be one conversation; it's going to be multiple conversations. And this being the first one, I think it's to me, I feel like it's almost a historical moment because it is something that this needs to happen, and it should have happened a long time ago. And again, piggybacking on Dr. Lewis, we shouldn't let our voices be muted. Our voices have to be heard. We have to articulate and be responsive and make sure our points are taken sincerely and be effective words so that when we do communicate, we are effective communicators. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Awa?
Hi, everyone. To add on to everything that everyone has been saying, I think that what the college could do is also advertise more cultural classes. There is European studies, Indian studies. We could bring more advertisement to African American studies so that students can take these courses and get more information, more knowledge on African American experience. And I think that will kind of bring more discussions. Students can talk more about everything that is going on. And I think conversations are very important. Just keeping everything in and ignoring it is not going to solve the problem. If we keep talking about it and integrating it into our system, then there's going to be more conversations that way. So with everything everyone has said, I think conferences like this are really important. With everyone coming together and learning and talking to each other, it's going to reduce the gap between race and cultures. And I really appreciate this opportunity and you guys giving this conversation an opportunity for us to come together like this. So I think those cultural classes is going to be really important for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Norwood.
Thank you, Dr. Graham, and thank you all for other responses thus far. I think I think the first step would be to certainly acknowledge how complicit we are in this racism or this racist society that has really been part of our existence since the beginning. Acknowledging that we as individuals are part of the problem, and I think this is what really pushes meaningful discourse is first acknowledging, because we can talk all day, and you'll have certain people in there like, oh, but they ain't talking about me because I'm not racist. I have I have a diverse group of friends. I've never called anyone a certain thing. And so really individually within our institution, everyone acknowledging their part in creating this culture. And then we have to unlearn all the things that we've kind of let kind of seep into our being. So again, I really enjoy this conversation. I'm really very thankful for all the work that's being done. But I would encourage us to first start by acknowledging that these are not just, we're not talking about, to look at it as not necessarily as a system, but as a person. I have biases. I have prejudices that I must unlearn. That way we can have real, meaningful discourse.
Thank you so much. And finally, Chief Cunningham.
So I think that last speaker has hit the nail on the head. I think first we all need to acknowledge the fact that each and every one of us has a different experience in life. Walking around as a Black male is different than walking around as a Hispanic male, a white male, or anyone else. The first piece here is acknowledging that racism is there, and acknowledging that your experience and my experience is different. I think that becomes the call to action. The call to action then becomes, how is life different for you? It starts these conversations at very basic levels so that we can begin to understand what going to the grocery store looks like for me versus what it looks like for you. I now become aware of those micro behaviors that demonstrate racism on an ongoing basis. And the more we know what we're looking for, the easier it is to see. And then we can all, in unison, white, Black, Hispanic, call out those micro behaviors that we see every day in society that is the manifestation of the racism and the awareness of race and culture differences that each and every one of us has. Acknowledging that it exists, the action is learning what they are, and the bond and the trust of us working together to not tolerate it any longer and to call it as we see it, so we can begin to build in trust.
Thank you so much. This next question, I would like to pose to Professor Tovar, Dr. Adil, to Mr. Norwood. These latest deaths have moved non-Black and white people to become more aware of systemic injustices and to search for ways to make improvements. While some are joining marches or making donations to various organizations to support the movement, others are engaging in social media to raise awareness of racism. What are tangible actions you believe students, faculty, and staff could take to become stronger allies in the movement? And I'd like to start with Mr. Norwood.
That's a really good question. I think I want to kind of reiterate what I ended with is this acknowledgement, but being intentional about calling out ourselves and in what we do to cultivate this society that we live in. What am I doing right now that could make someone feel inferior? What did I just say that may have rubbed someone the wrong way? So really pointing out when it is that we are in these moments that may be different than understanding that we have these different experiences, as the chief has said, but then acknowledging it and being intentional about unlearning it is what I think that we can do to become stronger allies with each other. And that's I'll end there.
All right, thank you so much. Dr. Adele.
Yes, one thing that, from my end, I'm a dean of students. Seeing the students and just interacting with the students, faculty all the time. So from where we see it from a student services, I think as Mr. Norwood mentioned, calling it out is very, very important, and just letting them know that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. If people are doing kind of behavior, they need to know what is our standing as an institution. And if you do not agree, then you don't have to be there. This is what we believe, this is what we stand for, and these are our tagline. If you do not follow company tagline or your college tagline, then there might be other institutions that they can look into, but just making it very clear, educating people, and it is done in several ways. Educating students is done not only in the classroom, but our role here is not to just award degree credentials. We want to make sure that we are there for student development. When they leave here at HCC, they are productive citizens of our society, and we must learn to live with each other and support each other. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, thank you so much. Professor Tovar.
Well, from a faculty standpoint, I think we need to be a little bit more engaging. And from that perspective, I think we should put more effort into learning about our students. It's not just about being in front of the classroom and teaching and clicking on a PowerPoint. I think we have to take the time, make the time to sit down, have these meaningful conversations with our students and get to learn our students. I think that the biggest thing that as an individuals we fear is the unknown. And it is the unknown that I believe makes those microaggressions evolve and come out when unexpected. Just as mentioned earlier, we need to look at ourselves and find out what is it that we do have to unlearn to make things better. But I think that once we make that time to learn about your student and learn about the people we've been trusted to lead and to teach, I think that that'll allow us to continue the conversations, learn about each other, and as we learn about each other, the inclusion evolves. Once that inclusion evolves, that's where the ally begins. Because as we begin to grow and nourish those rapports and those relationships, that's when we come together. That's when cohesiveness becomes something that is carried on. And as the dean mentioned, we have a bigger responsibility than just to teach and to make sure that our graduates are able to get meaningful employment. I think we have a bigger responsibility, and that is to make responsible citizens that are going to be engaging, citizens that are going to be able to give back to their communities in whatever way or form, whether it be social media, monetary donation. The point is give back, because without unification, I don't think there's much there. And I think that all these incidents that are happening of standing alone is what's causing even more issues. So I think unification is going to be the key here. And I believe it starts with learning about each other. And learning about each other will eliminate that fear of the unknown. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Chancellor Maldonado, Ms. May, President Lewis, and Dr. Holloman Douglas. What concerns do you have about the well-being and safety of our community? We'll start with the Chancellor.
I'm going to rephrase it as the hope and aspirations that I have for the community. And as Professor Tovar said, there are things that divide us that we need to work on unifying. But the literature is full of leadership styles that are inclusive, coming up with better solutions. You know, none of us is as smart as all of us. And the leader's job is to remove bias, all sorts of bias. When you get everyone's honest opinion, you come up with a better solution. So I'm hopeful that our community is going to unite in a way that we've never united before, and be the leader in the world as we are the #1 school for minorities in the country. Be the leader to set the tone for that conversation. We have leaders all around us, and they're starting to surface in large numbers. And for me, that gives me a high level of hope.
Thank you so much. Ms. May.
I echo what the Chancellor said, but there is another aspect. And, you know, right now, my concern is that we have a virus that we are all fighting, and many of us have been affected by that in our families. So a lot of people are isolated right now, or feel isolated, and it is hard to reach out. So my biggest concern right now is the fact that people need to reach out, and I want them to reach out to anyone that you can to have these discussions. More so than that, my hope is, and where I really see the inspiration of what we do in having these conversations, is that no person feels, regardless of their race, their gender, their how they identify and who they love, that they can't bring their whole selves to HCC. And I think we have to have those conversations. I think those are concerns as we go through. I agree with Chancellor Maldonado. It's definitely an aspiration. We have so many people who have become leaders. I am so inspired just hearing both Hannah and Gregory talking today as our students and what our leaders are going to be in the world as we go through.
Thank you so much. Dr. Holloman Douglas.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, for me, I do have real concerns based on the demographic of students we serve, the faculty, the demographic of our faculty and staff. The weekend after George Floyd was killed, I remember coming into work, or actually I didn't come in, I logged onto my computer for work. But I just remember that my mental state just wasn't where it should be. And I thought about my team, especially the Black staff that I have on my team, how they were able to show up and lead their meetings and participate in meetings. You know, it's so often it can just be business as usual. You know, after these things happen, we show up and we're just, you know, expected to be who we are and to be our authentic selves with no real recognition of what we just went through, what just happened this past weekend or last week, or what's been happening for centuries. And so do I have real concerns about the safety of our community? I do. About our mental state, about our physical state. You know, I'm sure we have a lot of students and even faculty and staff who are participating in the protests. You know, yeah, I can just be real and say that I do have real concerns. But I am thankful to work in a place where we do care for one another. I would encourage us to not wait for people to reach out to say, I'm having issues, but instead we need to be proactive. We need to reach out and see how our teams are doing. Reach out to our students and make sure that they know that we're here for them. We're here to listen. We have an awesome counseling center that's here. So I think we can do even a better job of reaching out to support one another rather than waiting for our people to reach out to us.
Thank you so much. President Lewis.
I'm going to echo the sentiments of everyone that just spoke, and especially underscore what the Chancellor and Dr. Holloman Douglas was saying. Right now, we're in the midst of 5 different crises. Okay, we started with the pandemic, which brought all people together and helped to bring to surface many of the problems that are taking place, which then brought on this economic crisis where people are now worrying about money. And that then brings about this information crisis. So you have individuals getting information from here, from there. So it's all these different narratives. Take those 3 crises, you put them together, and they become a mental crisis. So the level of mental strain that is taking place in our community is palpable. You step outside in any community, I don't care if it's a diverse community or a more segregated type of community for whatever reasons, and you have that mental health issue that's there. Then you bookend it with this Black Lives Movement on the other end. The compression of all that brings forth all of these different types of concerns, which again, I believe that the beginning to dealing with those concerns is acknowledging them. And today is a part of that. And then, as the Chancellor said earlier, take those steps, those actionable, reasonable steps to move towards them. And I know Greg said earlier, to acknowledge what's taking place within you, to acknowledge those fears. Many individuals, whom of which I've spoken with on a national scale in the last few weeks, they talk about comfort or feeling uncomfortable with certain conversations. Well, again, many individuals, and I believe I'm, one of many persons that feel this way, you live in a perpetual state of discomfort. And when I went to the store, I find myself at times walking, and I live in a very mixed neighborhood. I find myself people looking at me beforehand when I don't have a suit on. And I've mentioned this in other forums. I have 30 some odd tattoos, and I look very different. But I see people moving back and forth, and I know I can't change that. But going back to what Teddy said, at HCC, which I do believe we're at a point in time where we can make significant change, and I believe we will, is that our primary job is teaching and learning and acting as exemplars for our students. And when I say our students, I'm not talking about just individuals that are much younger than we are, but everyone around us. Let's embrace each other and build that deeper sense of belonging that Janet was talking about so that people aren't afraid. And I will say this to everyone with an earshot. If you do have something that's going on, please, by all means, reach out to me. As people have seen before, I will act as an advocate as best as I can. And I'm not talking about just racial disparities, but knowing that you do have those support mechanisms. Those are extremely important. So those would be my primary concerns at this time. Again, those 5 crises. You have I didn't make this up, so I don't want you guys to think I came up with these crises. They're in literature. I believe it's Wellman Cow, K-O-W, but it's the pandemic, the economic crisis, an information crisis, mental health crisis, which now at this point is being booked in by the Black Lives Matter movement.
Thank you. That is a lot to deal with, which leads us to our next question. And this next question is for President Lewis, for Dr. Holloman Douglas, for Mr. Norwood and Ms. Awa. So the recurring deaths of unarmed Black people are taking an emotional toll on the Black community at large. What are ways you have been caring for yourselves, your families, and others? And what would meaningful support look like from your HCC family? So how are you taking care of yourselves and your families? And what would meaningful support look like from your HCC family? And we will start with Ms. Awa.
During normal times, I think I'll be very concerned, but with the virus, the pandemic, I think we've been staying in a lot, and most of the way I contribute is to social media. But I do go to work. I work at a retail store, so I am concerned. A few days ago, I do have some cops that work. They come to our store all the time, so we're friends. And they came behind me. They were like, "Hey, what's up?" I turned around. Okay, it was momentary. Momentary. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I was concerned for a moment. I was like, "Oh." Um, I know if I told them that, they would be a bit, I don't know, sad. because of course they are no harm to me. And it's not just to the um the Cubs or to other white people, with people talking about white privileges. But I think that right now it's just a time where we feel scared. We don't want to, but we do feel scared. And I think a lot of times it's not that it's with everything going on. Even before the pandemic, racism is been happening, but right now it's just been at a high alert. And so I feel concerned for myself and my family. But at the same time, I think it gives me hope with these discussions like on what we're having right now, that we're heading somewhere, and hopefully in the future my children or my children's children will not have to worry about something like this or what I'm feeling right now. With support from the HCC family, I think just talking about the issue, allowing students to express themselves and talk about what they're concerned about, what their mental state is really, really helpful. And I think offering resources via mental health organizations on campus to not just African American students, but other students who feel like they don't know how to address these problems, they don't know how to talk about it. That would also be really helpful to every student attending HCC via online right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Mr. Norwood.
I was trying to think of I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, Dr. Lewis, President Lewis mentioned you have all of these different traumas that are kind of taking place at one time, and um, how do you cope with that? You know, is really what I'm finding myself kind of troubled with. One way I think is by limiting how much information I take in. Right, that there's just some stuff I just can't read, some videos I just can't watch, some conversations that I just have to stay away from because I have to limit how much I take in with either of these traumas. I think about also, but on the flip side of this, talking about it, right? Talking through or talking to people and talking through some feelings. You know, of course, with people I can be vulnerable with, people I can trust to be honest with, and you know, allowing me to have that space to lament and share how I'm feeling has been something that I've done. I think as far as HCC, I think Ms. Awa mentioned this earlier, but access to a great access to diversity courses that can allow in classroom deliberation could be very powerful. I think that inviting different voices to the table, different perspectives, is something that HCC can do to again kind of unlearn some of this stuff. So really, hearing from every kind of minority group is really what I would recommend to get an understanding of the different perspectives of different individuals from different minorities. But I would, if I could do a shameless plug real quick, because I'll be on another call later with Student Life. They are having they're having their week-long celebration, and today we're going to talk about mental health. And we're going to talk about what we can do to kind of cap some of this rage and fear and anger that we're feeling. We have a mental health specialist coming on. We have a life coach coming on, and then I'll try to say something. I don't really know what I can say after them two, but please, if you want more information about that, go on and join us at 1 o'clock.
Thank you so much. Dr. Holloman Douglas.
So how have I been caring for myself and my family? So I have a little boy, little black boy, and he's really cute. But he is almost 2 years old. And of course I have a husband, my father, my brother. I think about them constantly. And especially now with the heightened awareness of police brutality and the murders of Black men and women and trans people. And I think that's also something that we have not even begun to talk about is how this affects intersectionality in our LGBTQ communities. And so that's another conversation, but it needs to be intertwined into all of our conversations. So I just had to say that. But I think about them and I think about when they leave the house, what type of interactions they might have that may prevent them from making it back home safely. I think about what, right now my baby is only almost 2, but what will I teach him? I don't want to teach him to fear, to live in fear, but I do want him to be cautious and be careful. But even in the moments where, we're being cautious and careful and sleep or jogging, we still have these issues. So I think, as you can see, I'm still trying to, reconcile how I feel and how I care for myself and my family. What I can say is that I unplug. I limit my time on social media. I still have not seen the latest video of George Floyd. The other day, CNN was on the TV and I could hear him and I heard him say mama. And that it took me into another place. And so I'm still not ready to be able to watch that. And so I encourage others that one of my best friends always says, Black people, you do not have to watch the video, and I will say that to all people, you do not have to watch the video. We already know what the ending is. So if that's the way to care for yourself, then do that. And so that's the way that I care for myself. It's just limiting my time on social media and everything. But as far as my HCC family and the support that I would like to see, that I need to see, I think we're on the right we're on the right foot. We're on the right track. I think just remaining intentional about the work that we're doing, understanding equity and equality is great, but equity is even that much better. Equity is realizing that for years and years, there have been people who have historically not received the same as other people. And then how do we right those wrongs? And that requires us to be able to take a little bit from over here and move it over to where the need is. So I encourage us to be more intentional about what equity is really all about. And just take this moment to move forward. I keep hearing us talk about how this is a great moment, and glad to have these conversations. But we should have already been having them, and so I want us to continue this. Don't lose this moment.
Thank you so much, President Lewis.
I echo some of the same sentiments and place some personal context to my statements. Many of you guys, when you log into those of you who are faculty and you log onto the faculty page, you see a picture of me and my grandmother. My grandmother acts as the backbone for everything that I do and everything that I will do in my life. My grandmother actually passed away on April 10th on Good Friday. So right after that, I was in meetings, I kept going. You move on a month later, one of my best friends in the world, was like a brother to me. He passed away. And while I'm in meetings in transit to go to his services in rural Louisiana, I drive down this old dirt road as I pull up to this sprawling area of which he lived in. And as my wife and I got out of the car and everyone's heads turned, as my niece, his daughter, ran up to me and embraced me, and everyone looked with faces of confusion. He happened to be Caucasian, and no one knew that he and I were this close. So no one knew that I was Black because he never mentioned that. So for me, there's a lot of different emotional roller coasters that I've been going through. And the way that I deal with them, I'm more into service. So this summer with Dr. Perez, Dr. Drain, we've been working with the Miles High program with Boris Miles to work with those young men of color to help them transition into college. In addition to that, I met with Fraser Thompson. You guys know him as Trade of Truth the other week. We're working on some efforts. Other things that I've been doing is, someone asked me this yesterday, how do I measure success? I measure my success by the success of those around me. With that being said, I received a distressing phone call last week from a student. I have no idea how the student got my phone number, whatever, but the student is actually incarcerated. So what I've been able to do since this has been going on is to reach out to some attorneys that I know to give that student some help. I say all this to say, I say all that to say this. I keep myself busy doing things. I keep myself trying to help as many people as possible. Many times I'm asked, what do I want? What do I want to do? I feel as though I can't afford any wants because none of my needs have been met and the needs of those around me have not been met. So in regard to keeping myself stable and sane, as many of you guys see, in fact, someone described me last week as though I have ice water running through my veins because nothing ever seems to bother me visually. And things do bother me, but I've learned to compartmentalize and I don't personalize. So again, I will reiterate, I'm not looking for acknowledgement from anyone. I'm not looking for an embrace or something just for the moment. What I'm looking for in individuals is along the lines of what Greg was saying, something that's sustainable, something what the chancellor's working towards, something what I think in all of our statements, and Ted and I have spoken to some of this, we need to work together. And if we're going to work together, it starts with respect and honesty, and it continues with respect and honesty. And that must be the underscoring of everything that we do at this institution for our community, for our students, for our faculty, and our staff. We must stop allowing ourselves to be put in this adversarial type of positions, whether it's within the institution, outside of the institution. I would go back to what I started at the beginning of this year as faculty senate president, a sense of belonging. If you own it and you feel ownership in it, you're going to take care of it. If it's something that someone gives to you, you don't care about it as much. So remember, you guys, everything that we're talking about today, we own this moment. Okay? The moments from the past, that's not ours. We own this moment. So what happens from this point forward, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's on us. So you too have the responsibility, not just us, not the shows, those here talking. We have to actually walk the walk instead of just saying things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last two questions. This next one is directed to Chief Cunningham. What conversations have taken place within your team regarding the events over the past weeks, and what actions do you see taking moving forward? Chief Cunningham.
So, yes, ma'am. So, excuse me, I have to remove the mask so you can hear me. So our team obviously took a look at the elements of what occurred. We went back and we went through our policies. We went back and we went through our training. And the mission here is to ensure that we're teaching our staff better ways to do what they need to do, and to make sure that we are checking each other. The conversations were interesting. You know, I have a very diverse group. The perspectives that were brought to the table really taught a lot of us different perspectives on the way we conduct business, and ensuring that we're doing everything we can to not allow the micro actions that we've been talking about to leak through to our day-to-day business. Above and beyond that, we had conversations about we're being very candid with each other. We can talk to each other. And a lot of it is because we're professionally linked, but a lot of it is also linked to the fact that we've built trust over time. And it doesn't matter whether the staff member is white, Black, Hispanic, or any other race. Because we have that trust between us, talking to one another, being frank with one another, is something that we've achieved. I think it's the key to moving forward. We need to understand how to service our community and provide the protection that is our mission, right? It's what we're driven to do. And we need to learn how to make sure that we're doing that respectfully. We need to do it with absolutely the minimum force necessary to get it done, and no force at all if possible. What came out of those conversations was this: our policies are really pretty good. I sat with 3 or 4 chiefs of police yesterday and we compared notes. We are using cutting edge benchmarked policies And then we talked about training and how we do that. And we also do an outstanding job there. Where there's a state requirement, you can meet that requirement by showing a PowerPoint presentation, but we go further than that. We make sure that once they get the knowledge, we then put them in a practical exercise and they practice those skills. The reason why all of that is important is because if you do the job properly and you pay attention to the details, things like Mr. Floyd's death never would have happened. While taking a man to the ground is an approved practice if it's necessary, putting him in a recovery position, getting him up, making sure he can breathe is our obligation and responsibility the minute that the minute the situation is controlled. That didn't happen, and unfortunately that young man passed away because of it. Professionally, I am appalled by what I saw. It is not professional police work. It is not the way we've trained our staff. It is not the expectations we have for our staff. And in unison, all of my commanders, all of our supervisors have made the commitment to see to it that quality police work is done in our community. And we're also taking on the additional obligation to see to it that quality police work is done by others in our community.
Thank you so much, Chief. Appreciate that. This last question is for Professor Tovar. While many may think racism does not exist in higher education, excuse me, it does. As a faculty member, how have you witnessed racism in higher ed, and what steps do faculty leaders need to take to address racism in higher ed? Professor Tovar.
Wow, really good question. And yes, you know, we don't want to admit it. Sometimes we try to ignore it because we're afraid to speak up. But it's time to change. It is time to speak up. Again, I will reiterate what I said before. It's time that as educators and as leaders in education, we have to be role models. And as role models, we must ensure that we learn about each other. Again, I think that our biggest fear is the unknown. One thing that I pushed forward in our department in respiratory therapy was to mandate student faculty mentor sessions. And I spoke to my faculty and I said, the mentor session is going to be beyond, hey, let's look at your grades. We know what the grades are. The student knows what the grades are. This is an opportunity for us to get to learn about the student, learn about their culture, learn about their family situations, their economic situations. And this will better allow us to identify when the grade starts to slip. What's going on? Are you working too much? Maybe you need to scale back on your hours. You know, I think that the more we learn about our students, they appreciate it. I did a survey and got some results back, and it was very surprising to me that they felt that we were more than just teachers. They felt like they could come to us. It allowed the mentor session and the open door policy that we practice allowed for that openness and that trust. And I think that trusting in us allowed them to feel inclusion. And so now when we have students that are having issues or troubles or concerns, they feel comfortable coming to us. And I think it's that comfort level that allows us to learn about each other, and then the inclusion comes in and it allows us to, again, be more cohesive. I received, you know, the faculty and I, we received numerous emails of graduates from 3, 4, past 5 years ago telling us about their what's going on in their life. You know, recently I received some pictures of one student that graduated 2 years ago. She had some beautiful twin babies. I mean, how many students can actually do that with their faculty members and say, hey, this is where I'm at in life now. So I think these mentor sessions have really promoted that learning of each other, and it has allowed the students to be closer to us. And I think that the more we learn about each other, the more we learn about ourselves and how we really see things. And again, you know, we all have these microaggressions. You know, I have friends that you know, of color. I have friends that are Caucasian. I have a multitude of friends. And there's always that one person, oh, well, I'm colorblind. Well, that's a problem because you should see color. Because I think that once you see color, then you're able to identify what is really happening. You know, it's more than an expression. It's something that you really need to look at yourself and really have an outlook of what is really happening out there. You know, you may live in a very nice neighborhood where those sorts of things don't happen, but believe me, they do happen. I see it in my neighborhood. I mean, I'm not in River Oaks, but I live in a nice neighborhood, but I still see those microaggressions, and I've been here 17 years, so I know they exist. So if they exist in my neighborhood, I know they exist on campus. Again, as educators and as leaders, we have a higher responsibility than just standing in front of the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this ends the questions that I have for the panelists. We're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So Kyle, if you could kind of fill some of those questions, that would be really great.
Yes. So there was a question on how have social justice issues and concerns for perpetuating institutional discrimination have they been considered in decisions about the process to reopen HCC campuses for students, faculty, and staff, especially with the resurgence?
That is not a question for me. So can someone on the panel answer that? Dr. Maldonado, could you answer that question?
Well, the implementation of the CDC guidelines is a uniform implementation across everyone that comes into the institution for protecting others as well as themselves. What we're reminding students and employees is to be considerate of what they do on their personal time, because who they gather with in a non-social distance way, in a non-PPE way, may end up affecting others. So from an equity standpoint, everyone's coming back in with the same requirements. Now, we know statistically and in a meaningful way that the data shows that African Americans are more susceptible to the coronavirus. The environment that we provide is built on the guidance that we have from the experts. Right. So I think my response would be that we're following the guidelines that apply, that have been propagated by the federal government, the state, and the local officials, and in terms of the social distancing and the masks and so forth, and the requirement to come into the building is the same as it is at the hospitals. If you go to a hospital today or to go to an eye clinic today, it's all the CDC requirements, and that's what we're implementing. And I want to add that we're doing it in a compliant way. I've asked everyone to enforce what we're doing. If I show up at one of my campuses without my college ID, I am not to be allowed in. If I show up without a mask, I am not to be allowed in. And the reports I'm getting back is that we're implementing all of the protocols in a way that's compliant.
Thank you.
Dr. Maldonado. Diversity does not always mean inclusion. Would HCC be open to administering a diversity climate survey to take the pulse of our environment for students and employees?
Was that for me?
I think.
Yes, I believe so.
I think Janet was about to.
We have communication is important. We have many activities going on across the institution that are dealing with this exact same thing. What happened to Mr. Floyd and the many others is horrific and should not have happened. But notwithstanding that, we have been working on building toward an office of inclusion. And we have an inclusion fellow that was implemented 2 years ago. And in the upcoming budget, it's a separate funded position of equity and inclusion. And we've got objectives that we're going to meet with that in terms of what is the goal of the institution and what does that mean at HCC. So we're in a starting point with that. I mentioned that we're going to have the institute where we're going to be doing some teaching, both from employees and providing credit courses for students. It'll take us a little bit to get there, but we'll be out of the starting gate soon. And though, if you ask the faculty senate presidents that I've been working with in building this, we've had a sense of urgency, all of us, for some time. We're not going to stop working on it, and it's going to happen much sooner, regardless of what's going on around us, because we've been planning for it. Now, certainly the urgency gets elevated when we have the sort of injustices that we're seeing. So the survey is part of what talent engagement is working on. We have a continual touch points for our employees, finding out how they feel, what are they concerned about, and it's incumbent on the employees to respond. We just sent some out recently on the reopening of the institution, and Janet can tell you about the results of those. We saw some of that in another meeting earlier this morning. So I just ask, I know everyone is inundated with surveys. Please look at the surveys that HCC is sending out and help us configure an environment that's going to be conducive to what we want to achieve as an institution.
Thank you. Kyla, I want to address one question here. It goes along with if you see something, say something. One person asked, what are we going to do to right the wrongs many of us have already had to endure, like retaliation, discrimination from supervisors and leaders? When many of us speak up, we become a target. Can anyone answer that, respond to that question?
So Helen, I want to respond to that a little bit because sometimes those issues rise up into my area. First of all, I want to be really, really clear. We do not tolerate retaliation when someone sees something and brings something to the forefront. Those of you who have worked with me know that. I know not everybody has had the opportunity to work with me and on that end, but it is imperative that everybody understands that. We've had conversations on both sides. I have had colleagues, and I consider everybody, when we talk about faculty, staff, I actually like to use team members and colleagues because we are all colleagues and team members together, who have come to me and really opened up about what is going on. And I'm not afraid to go have those conversations with those supervisors or other employees to really do that. So first off, I don't want anybody to be afraid to bring that forth. You should not feel that you are a target, because you are not. We cannot address it if we do not know. And to our managers, our supervisors, and other students and employees out there, know this: we don't tolerate retaliation. It is not something to tolerate. If we are going to overcome, if we are going to do better, if we are going to listen to one another, if we are going to be the nation's community college, and I think we go beyond just Houston, if we are going to be that leader, we have to step up and we have to do that. And I don't know if that directly answers the question, but that comes from my perspective. And I know that the chancellor has been very, very adamant in regards to that. We've had many conversations. I've had conversations with many of the faculty and the staff leaders also.
So if I could add, in about 2016, Zeph Capo, Trustee Capo, was the chair of the board when we adopted some policies, and specifically DGBA local. That is the appeal process you have. All right, so there's a process to follow, and the first step is talking to your supervisor about what your perceptions are. But if you have disagreement, it doesn't end there. You can appeal it further, and eventually you can get to the board. So we don't tolerate retaliation. That's not the type of organization that I want to be involved with. And we put in place policies to help support those that feel like they have been retaliated against. All right, so I mean, there's a process for you to follow. Please go look at the policies. Specifically on that one is DGBA local, and Talent Engagement can help you with that, but it's on our website.
If I could jump in and speak from a student's perspective, as far as student leaders, and I do have to make clear, I'm not the president of HCC Central's SGA SGA anymore. We have a new one, so I am retired, as I tell my friends and as I joke. But I think student leaders created this culture of comfortability, if you will, that students can come to the SGA members and then trust that the SGA members will then understand the processes that Dr. Maldonado just spoke about, and can, from a student perspective, and then push that on further. I've certainly had students come to either the office I was at or via telephone, and then just ask me if I could take it further. And so I really had to learn what's that chain of command, who do I submit what to, and so student leaders on campus really have responsibility to ensure that we know exactly what to do, and then be actual advocates for our students when they have concerns and or issues.
And to Mr. Norwood's point, there is an equivalent policy for students to follow as well in order to voice their concerns.
Okay. Kyle, I think we have time for a couple of more questions.
There is a question for Chief Cunningham. What are you teaching the officers about racial profiling on a continuous basis?
So what I think I need to tell you is that for several years, back 8, 9, 10 years, we've been required to examine racial profiling with every single stop that we do. We capture that information on the stop, and the officer documents all of the reasons why a stop occurred, and that's documented into his reports, and those reports are examined by supervisors on a daily basis, and they are rolled up into an annual report that we turn into the state. So understand the whole concept of racial profiling, and the fact that state law has told us that we're not permitted to do that is an ongoing educational process. We practice it each and every day. We examine our performance against it each and every day. And we do this annual report, roll it up, and submit it to the state, who then takes a look at it to make sure that what we're doing is compliant with the law, but above and beyond that is a benchmark standard that law enforcement across the state is obligated to live up to.
So we've lost audio there.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I'm finished. I've answered the question. If there's additional questions about that, please let me know.
Okay. Kyle, one more question, please.
There was a question, are there any plans for expanding mental health and counseling services to students?
Can anyone answer that question?
The expert in the institution in regards to what we're doing in that area for students is over in student services. and Dr. Grays, or I don't know if Dr. Holloman Douglas can offer the services that we provide to support students.
Sure, yes, sir. So, currently we do, we offer services in a variety of ways, even being remote and working virtually. Our counselors are available for students to be able to meet with them either through webcam, the use of webcam, or over the phone. They've created a lot of different mini videos to help with students dealing with trauma and um, uh, knowing how to process their feelings and how they're feeling in different situations. There are a lot of different things that we're doing. I encourage students to go on our website. Our counselors have been very active in reaching out as well, but we have a lot of different options for our students. So we're still available, even working remotely.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
I'd like to add on that as a student leader, this is my second year working with a lot of great minds of students who have so many goals and ideas. And I think that the system could give student organizations a lot more resources. And as student leaders or student organizations are being led by students, and we have more interactions with students across the system. And I think that if we're given more resources or a better platform where we could have these conversations, not just on mental health, but conversations on race and identity, I think that would be really cool. Right now, student organizations are mostly steered towards having events where students can unwind. But I think that we could do more because students feel more comfortable with us as we are sort of like fellow students. So if student organizations are giving more way and more resources and a better platform, I think we'll be more equipped with having these conversations freely with other students across the system.
Thank you so much. In closing, does anyone else on the panel have any closing remarks?
If I could just briefly refer back to something Mr. Norwood and Chief Cunningham talked about, the micro behaviors. I have a 12-year-old granddaughter, a 9-year-old grandson that are living through this, and they don't understand it. They don't understand what's going on. They don't have the maturity level yet. But they do watch what their grandfather does. How many of us, if we get too much change back from the grocery store and we're in the car, do we go back in and give them, you gave me $2 too much, or whatever it is? How many of us, when someone rings something up at a department store and it's a wrong price, do we point that out to them? How many of us make little decisions, right? That other people are watching us. So there is a cumulative effect. You might go into a meeting and say a bunch of nice things, and then you go right back out. And some of the comments in the message board are reflective of that, some of that mindset. We're not bad people. We all think the right things, but it's the micro behavior. Sometimes we say some things that end up not building on the mission that we have. So I think there's a lot there. If we take what Mr. Norwood and Chief said about micro behaviors, is just look at every single thing you do and the decisions you make, and if you make them right at the end, you'll end up being someone who can affect the change that we're trying to accomplish.
And to respond to that, Chancellor, I am that person who will go back and say, hey, you gave me the incorrect change. And you're right, it does make a difference because someone is always watching and learning from that. So you are exactly right. Any other closing comments?
I would like to say that just as you said and the chancellor just said, just remember that everyone is always watching. So the behaviors that we example for everyone else around, people take note. Just as the chancellor, I have 2 grandkids, but more so I have many more students out there, some of them who think they're my children, but they're not. But still, we are always being watched, whether we are faculty, staff, no matter what we do here. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to act as those examples as we move forward. especially the students also. You know, act and become what it is you want the world to be and work in that direction.
Okay,
Uh,
in closing there, sorry. Was there another comment?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's after 12:30, but just want to say that we have this idea that all lives matter, and that's really true. But all lives matter is only true if Black lives matter, if trans lives matter, if poor lives matter, and so and those are not just words. Those aren't just hashtags. Those are ideas. And so before you hashtag it, let's ensure that we are being that. Let that be your whole aura, that everybody you encounter is someone of importance, someone who matters. And it goes back to what Dr. Lewis said. Then we'll get that respect, and then we can go somewhere.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norwood, for bringing that up. And just in case you did not know, when someone like transgender or Black people or Latino people, when they bring up a specific problem or issue that's plaguing their community, when we respond with all lives matter, what we are doing is using microaggression. We are diminishing the importance or the relevance of that particular issue for that particular group of people. And so we may not be aware that that's what we're doing, but that's exactly what we're doing. It's someone phrased it eloquently. It's like you're at a funeral and someone is eulogizing their child and someone hijacks the mic and says, well, all children are important. It's equivalent to the same thing. So we need to be aware of that. There are so many more questions in the Q&A chat box. And I just want to know if there's a way that we can capture these questions and provide answers to our audience, because they have some really good questions that really deserve to be answered. So if we could do that, that would be absolutely wonderful. And again, this town hall has been recorded. It will be made available next week. And this ends our discussion at this time. I thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much for your courage in attending and answering these questions. And audience, thank you so much for attending and posing these questions. You all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.